Hello, welcome to Class Time, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAVE students. You can watch this lesson in real time on Television Jamaica's YouTube channel or One Spot Media. We are also live on gojamaica.com. If you have questions on any of today's subjects, you can send them to Television Jamaica's Facebook page at Television Jamaica or Instagram at television_Jamaica or use the hashtag TVJClassTime. We want to see those questions. Today's lesson is CSEC English Literature and I'm Alethea Brown. In today's lesson, we'll be looking at poetry and in the analysis, we will look at tone and mood, examining Sylvia Plath's poem, Mirror. Now, when we start to analyze a poem, it is always good to do an analysis of the title of the poem, as this can give some amount of insight as to what the poem is about. So that's the first thing we are going to do. But before we get there, in terms of our objectives, by the end of the lesson, you should be able to discuss the significance of the poem's title, assess the situation in the poem, identify the literary devices in the poem, and discuss how they contribute to the overall meaning of the poem. Also, I hope you'll be able to discuss words that are appropriate to describing the tone and mood of the poem. So now we are going to be doing an analysis of the title, and the title of the poem is Mirror. So we're going to go to the board here, and we're going to brainstorm some ideas that come to mind when we think of the word mirror. So we're going to put mirror right in the center here. And then I want you to think of some possible words that come to mind when you think of the word mirror. I hear reflection. Very good. Mirror. Reality. Excellent. You think of image. Good. Any other word that comes to mind? Okay. Objectivity. Interesting. And of course, these are some of the words associated with mirror. So we have reflection. When we think of a mirror, what it does is to reflect whatever image is put in front of it. So if you put a teacup in front of a mirror, it's highly unlikely that the mirror is going to reflect a vase with flowers. Whatever you put in front of the mirror is what you're going to see in the reflection. We think image because that's what a mirror does. It creates images of whatever is put in front of it. Reality. As I said before, you cannot put a cat in front of a mirror and expect to see a lion roaring back at you. Highly unlikely. Unless by some strange mystic thing that happens. But in the real world, highly unlikely. A mirror gives a true representation of what is put in front of it. And of course, sometimes a mirror calls for introspection. How does that work? Well, sometimes when you look in a mirror, you don't necessarily like what you see. So what you do is to adjust what is on the outside so that what is on the inside can feel better. Did you know that whatever is on the inside reflects on the outside? Of course. Why do you think sometimes people's faces look so miserable and cross and angry? It's because what is on there's chaos on the inside, and so it reflects on the outside. So sometimes when we stand in front of a mirror, we are called to do some amount of introspection. Am I liking what I see here? And if you're not liking what you see on the physical, how can you adjust it so that what is inside is reflected nicely on the outside? So these are some of the ideas that come to mind when we think mirror. So we're going to be looking at the poem now and see how what we have discussed here comes out in the poem, or if these points come out at all. So I'm going to be reading the poem for you now, and then we're going to look at how we can apply the title, the words that we've brainstormed, to the poem itself. So here we begin. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever you see, I swallow immediately just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I'm not cruel, only truthful, the eye of a little God four-cornered. Most of the time I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is a part of my heart. But it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. No, I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. She turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning, it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. Oh, wow. What an expression here. All right, so we are looking at the idea of mirror. A few seconds ago, we looked at some of the words that we can associate with the word mirror. We saw reflection, image, reality, true representation, introspection. Now, can we see any of these words being applied to the poem that was just read? Yes. First of all, let us look at how the words relate to the poem. So, we are going to examine who is speaking. That's very important. What is the person speaking about? And then, how does the title fit in with the whole context here? So in terms of who is speaking, who do you see doing the speaking in the poem here? Let us look back at the line that says, I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Notice the use of the pronoun I. Who is speaking? Very good. The mirror speaks. And if I were to retitle this poem, that's what I would have given as a title. The mirror speaks. So a mirror is speaking. And the fact that a mirror is speaking, it's already pointing us in the direction of a particular figure of speech. But later on, we'll get to that. So the mirror speaks. What is the mirror speaking about? The mirror is telling the predicament of a woman. She's searching for something that she has lost. What has she lost? She comes day after day. She looks in the mirror. And then when the mirror takes on the characteristic of a lake, the woman is there searching its reaches for what? For who she is. Evidently, she has lost something. Youthfulness, beauty, and old age has crept up on her. And do you get the impression that she's satisfied with who or what she has become? No. So she continues to search, hoping that one day she will go to that lake and maybe see something that is going to remind her of what was in the past. But remember what we said about the mirror. It is a true reflection. It does not lie. What you put in front of the mirror is what is reflected. So is it then possible for this woman who has obviously aged, who has obviously transitioned to another phase of life, is it possible for her now to look in the lake and see a young girl? No, it's pretty much like we said before. You cannot put a cat in front of a mirror and expect to see a lion. What it sees is what it reflects. So how does the title now fit in with the entire poem? Very good. So the mirror is speaking. It tells the predicament of a woman. And we know that that predicament is the woman is searching for a version of herself that no longer exists, and hopes that the mirror will show her the image that she wants to see. So we see how the title of mirror is fitting in here. It's a reflection of who she is now. She is doing some form of introspection and not necessarily liking what she sees, but the mirror is reflecting exactly what she is, and that is an old woman. And notice the use of the last line there, the simile, that the image that she's seeing now jumps at her like a what? Like a terrible fish. It therefore means that whatever this woman is seeing, she's really not comfortable with it at all. And just an aside here, I think it's probably a very miserable state for somebody to be in, to be looking in a mirror and really detesting the image that is portrayed or reflected through the mirror. That has to be sad. And I think that's why the comparison there of the image rising at her like a terrible fish. So what we have just done is to put the poem into context. We can go ahead now to look at how the writer uses devices to highlight the meaning and how the writer creates tone and mood also in tandem with the meaning of the poem. Are there any questions so far? Okay, beautiful. So we're going to be looking at some devices that the writer incorporates in the poem to clarify the meaning of the poem. But first of all, let us look at what devices are. So when we talk about literary devices, we are talking about general techniques that a writer uses to create a special effect in the piece, or to convey information, or to help readers understand the writing on a deeper level. So that's what devices are. They are like the techniques, the tools that the writer uses to convey the information in a clearer manner or with more clarity. So you can recall from your literature classes, and maybe from grade 7 you were introduced to some devices. Some of these devices can be figures of speech. What are those figures of speech? We have examples like simile, very good, personification, excellent, metaphor, very good, and the list goes on. Devices also include others like repetition. And we know when a writer uses repetition, it's to emphasize a certain point, to bring your attention to that particular aspect of the writing. Devices also include imagery. And we know we have different types of images. So there is the visual image, and that one appeals to the sense of sight, excellent. We have the olfactory image, and that one appeals to the sense of smell, very good. We have tactile images, and those appeal to the sense of feeling, excellent. So these are some of the devices that a writer can incorporate into a piece. And the whole point of using the devices is to bring more clarity to the work so that the reader hopefully will be able to relate more to whatever is being projected. Are you following so far? Great. So what are some of the devices used in this poem? Think about it. We established one at the very beginning, a mirror speaking. That points us in the direction of a particular device. Do you know what it is? Yes, personification. Because what is happening here is that the writer is giving the mirror human form. Now, can you imagine what it would be like to see a mirror jump down off the glass and start talking to you? Or off the dresser and start talking to you? So in essence, mirrors do not speak. Well, I'm hoping they don't. Right? So the mirror is given a human quality here, and it is speaking. Notice it starts by saying, I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. What I see is what I reflect. So what the mirror does in the first stanza, is to establish itself as something that is genuine, something that is factual, something that is not going to give you what you want to see. It is going to reflect exactly what you put in front of it. So we see the personification there. There is also the use of metaphor in the poem. For example, in me she has drowned a young girl. Now there's nowhere in the poem where we see this old woman holding down the girl underwater until she has drowned. But we realize that there is an aspect of her life that has gone. So in the mirror, in the lake, she has drowned a young girl. That part of her is missing. And she has spent so much time trying to find it back. She's probably lost in terms of wanting to find back what is not there. We also see the use of contrast, where the mirror speaks about those liars, the candles or the moon, contrasting itself because candles and moon give a different type of reflection. They romanticize the image. Can you imagine, a lady coming out in a ball gown and you see the candlelight and everything? Right. So what we are doing here is looking at the devices. But we are going to stop right here and take a quick break. We'll be back with more English literature.
It's here. Interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel on onespotmedia.com. With a combination of live Zoom classes and recorded class time, Schools Not Out lessons, and numerous educational content, we've created a comprehensive 24-hour channel dedicated exclusively to educating our nation's youth. Early childhood through to primary, secondary and tertiary, it's one stop on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in association with Television Jamaica Limited.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much.
It's here. Interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel on onespotmedia.com. With a combination of live Zoom classes and recorded class time, Schools Not Out lessons, and numerous educational content, we've created a comprehensive 24-hour channel dedicated exclusively to educating our nation's youth. Early childhood through to primary, secondary and tertiary, it's one stop on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in association with Television Jamaica Limited.
Welcome back. This is CSEC English Literature. We are discussing Sylvia Plath's poem, Mirror. Before the break, we were looking at what the context of the poem is. So we saw where a mirror is actually speaking, and the mirror is presenting to the reader or to the audience the predicament of a woman. What is this predicament? The woman is searching for something that she has lost. Youthfulness, beauty. She's searching for a form of version of herself that no longer exists. We also looked at the fact that the writer incorporates literary devices in the piece to make the work a little clearer, to bring clarity, to allow us to see certain things more vividly. Among those devices, as we had discussed, were the use of figures of speech, among other devices. So at the point where we took the break, we were looking at the use of personification in the poem. And we said that the fact that the mirror is speaking is a personified image that the writer is communicating to us here. So the mirror in the first stanza of the poem establishes its parameters. The mirror says, I am frank, I do not romanticize images. What you put in front of me is what I reflect. All right, so the mirror tells its story. I think it's Muta Baruka has a poem similar to that, the monkey speaks its mind or something like that. So the mirror speaks its mind. We also see the use of metaphor in the poem. For example, in me, she has drowned a young girl. Now we say that this is figurative because it's not as if the woman held down a young girl or held down the younger version of herself and drowned it in the lake. But we realize that she has lost something over the years, having spent so much time being self-absorbed. She has become old, she's wrinkled, aging, and she's not liking what she's seeing. So it's as if she has drowned the younger part of her in the lake. We're going to move on now to look at the whole issue of contrast in the poem. And the mirror says, she turns to those liars, the candles, or the moon. The contrast here is between what two entities, or three entities in this case? The mirror, as opposed to the candles or the moon. Now, why would the mirror refer to the candles and the moon as liars? We said that the image that the candles and the moon project may not necessarily be the reality. Because if you look at yourself in candlelight, chances are when you turn on the real light, you might be surprised to see that what the candle was reflecting is not necessarily what the real light reflects. So the mirror contrasts itself. It does not do that. It projects the real image that you put in front of it. And there's also the use of simile, where the mirror says, an old woman now rises toward her like a terrible fish. And for some reason, when I first read this poem, I pictured the movie Piranha. Have you ever watched it? Yes, in the last part where they thought everything was okay, and you see that ugly fish just jump out at them. Yeah, that's what I pictured. And if that is the image that came to my mind, it suggests that whatever this woman is seeing now, it's really not something beautiful. And I guess that's why she constantly goes to the lake, hoping that one day she will see something other than what she's currently seeing. So these are some of the devices, figures of speech and devices used in the poem. So how do these devices now contribute to the overall meaning of the poem? Because remember, devices are not just put in the poem willy-nilly. They serve a purpose. So in order to assess the contribution that these devices make to the poem, what you can look at is, what is the poem about? That's the first thing. Remind yourself of the context of the poem, and then examine how the devices help in assisting or highlighting the meaning of the poem. Are you following? Right, so just to refresh your minds, what is the poem about? It is about a woman who has lost a version of herself and is searching desperately for it because whatever she has become, she's not comfortable with it. How does each device now assist in highlighting this meaning? Let us look at the use of personification. So the mirror speaks, I am silver and exact. It goes on to say there are no preconceptions, whatever it sees, etc. and so on. How does this personification contribute to our overall understanding of the poem? Well, this is an idea of how you could look at it. The personification makes the account of the mirror seem genuine. So if the mirror sets itself up as somebody who is not going to lie to you, then we can rely on its account of what is happening. The mirror does not create a facade for the woman. It does not create an illusion. What she sees is what she really is. It therefore means that we do not question whether this woman is aging or not. If the mirror sets up itself as somebody who speaks the truth, then what the writer prompts us to do is to accept the mirror's account of what is happening here. All right, so the personification helps to clarify meaning by showing us that yes, this woman is aging, and yes, she's not really accepting the reality of the aging process. Let us look at the contrast. Remind ourselves of the situation. The woman is searching for a version of herself that no longer exists. Remember, when you're assessing the figures of speech or devices, you have to always bear the context in mind, because you have to apply the devices or the figures of speech to the context of the poem. So the woman is searching for a version of herself that no longer exists. The contrast, she turns to those liars, the candles, or the moon. How does this contrast help to highlight the meaning of the poem? Well, this is one way of looking at it. It authenticates the mirror's story, just pretty much like the personification did. The mirror does not romanticize the woman's image as the candle or the moon does. So, appearance is reality. Do you see how these devices are contributing to the overall meaning of the poem? Right. They point to the authenticity of the mirror's version of the story. They allow us to wonder, okay, if it is that the mirror is speaking the truth, then chances are this woman is really in a bad state, not accepting the fact that she's aging, not accepting the fact that her youthfulness is gone. And it is very sad because everybody ages. The very moment you sleep and wake up another day, you have put on some form of age onto your being. But she's not accepting that at all. So that is what is communicated in the poem. All right, so we have looked at the contrast. We have looked at the personification. You go ahead now and try the simile. How does the simile help to accentuate the meaning of the poem? Write your responses and remember you can share them with us. So now we're going on to look at the tone and the mood of the poem. What if I say to you, stop right there? How would you describe my tone? Commanding, maybe. Authoritative, probably. Demanding, I guess. So you can detect my tone, but how did you detect my tone? Maybe from my voice, right? The pitch of my voice. Cool. Now what if I had written the same thing on paper? You're not hearing my voice on the paper, so how would you be able to detect the tone? So that's what we're going to be looking at now. So when we talk about tone, and these days with all these emojis and so on going around, we know what mood is. So for example, this one is a mood of, it represents a mood of sadness. That one, definitely a mood of anger. And the other, yeah, yippee! Like, you know, we are doing poetry and we're just happy, woohoo! Yeah, this is where you cheer, because you should be happy doing poetry. All right. So we understand moods, okay. When it comes on to mood, we are talking about the feeling that the poet allows you to have after you have read the story. So mood refers to how you feel after you have read the piece. The writer puts the audience in a particular frame of mind through the representation of the situation and through the choice of words. So that is one way you can detect mood. You look at the choice of words and you look at the context within those words, within which those words are operating. All right? So, having read the poem Mirrors, how does the poem make you feel about the woman and her situation? Do I need to remind you of the situation? A woman not accepting her current position, having aged, having, gone through another phase of life. She's not accepting who she is. Write 2 words that describe your feelings towards her. And ensure that when you have written those 2 words, you can justify them with examples from the story, from the poem rather. So how does a poet make you feel? We're talking about mood now. How you feel having read the poem. All right, let's see if you came up with these answers. Did you come up with a feeling of sadness? I certainly felt sad when I read that poem, like I was almost to the point of tears. All right, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you get where I'm going. It's a feeling of sadness. Maybe also you felt some form of sympathy towards this woman. And if you did, it means that you're connecting with the poem. Because the writer sets the situation of this woman up in such a way that you want to feel sorry for her. Think about it. She goes to the lake day after day. At one point in the poem, the mirror, having taken on the form of a lake, the mirror says the woman comes to it day after day. In fact, it's the first thing it sees in the morning after the darkness of the early morning has passed. The woman is the first thing it sees. She goes there day after day, searching its reaches for something that the lake really cannot give her. And this is very sad. So the image that she sees jumps at her like a terrible fish. So in terms of sadness, now we remember we have to provide our evidence. Very good. So what part of the poem makes you feel some form of sadness for the woman? We can look at line 14. Your books should be open. So go to line 14. It says, "She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands." Tears, agitation of hands. The shaking, the nervousness. So she turns her back to the lake, and the lake rewards her faithfully. It shows exactly, it reflects her back. That's what the mirror will do. And in the form of the lake, it's going to do the same thing. But the woman now she's a bit nervous now, to turn back and look in the lake because she wants, whenever she turns around, to see something different. Like she's begging the lake, please show me my youthfulness. Show me my beauty that I had when I was young. So she rewards the lake with tears and agitation of hands. So what we see here is that the woman is evidently suffering a deep level of discontentment with who she is. And as such, the reader is prompted to feel sympathy or a mood of sadness. It puts you in a mood of sadness. With regard to the sympathy, we could look at lines 17 to 18. In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. Honestly, I feel like I'm going to cry right now. Seriously. This is sad. I really feel sympathetic towards this woman because she has lost a part of her that she will never get back, and she's not doing too well with it at all. All right, so are you following so far? So what we have done, we have looked at how literary devices contribute to meaning, and now we are looking at how the writer creates tone and mood to also contribute to the meaning of the poem. We said mood speaks about how you feel after you have read the poem. What emotions does the poem evoke from you? I think of myself, sometimes I watch a movie. I remember, for example, when I watched Armageddon. Well, after I watched Armageddon for 12 times, and I cried the 12 times. As that last part when he said, baby girl, I don't think I'm going to make it, and so on, and it's going to explode now. The 12 times I've watched Armageddon, I've cried the 12 times. And I'm not talking about like little tears streaming down. It's like that, because, it evokes that kind of mood. It's sad, it is depressing, and I really feel it for him that he sacrificed himself for the earth. All right, but I'm getting carried away. So the poem creates or evokes a mood of sadness or a mood of sympathy. All right, let's talk tone now. So mood is how you feel having read the particular work. What does tone refer to? When you talk about tone, when I just started, I gave you a scenario where you were supposed to detect my tone. What is tone? All right, so when we talk about tone, we are talking about the writer's attitude toward the subject matter or the audience. So just to refresh your memory, mood, how you feel. Tone, how the writer feels, or how the speaker in the piece feels. All right, in written composition, it's an attitude of a writer towards a subject or an audience. But you are not hearing the writer, so to speak. So how are you going to detect the tone? Well, just like mood, you have to look at certain elements of the work in order to detect tone. Also, tone can be looked at as a general feeling conveyed through the choice of words. So you see where choice of words become very important when we are assessing the tone or even the mood of a particular piece. How do we detect tone? You look at the voice in the work. There's always a voice. Who is speaking? How does the voice sound in relation to the subject matter? So we established earlier on that the voice in this particular poem is the mirror. So the mirror speaks. Not Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath wrote the poem, but she has employed the voice of the mirror to speak to the audience. It's just like you writing a story. You are the writer of the story, but maybe your character is Jacob. I'm talking about Jacob from the Twilight Saga. I just can't get over Jacob. All right, but I won't get carried away this time. Right, so maybe you are the writer of the story, but Jacob is the one who is relaying the events of the story. It's a similar thing with poetry. So Sylvia Plath is the author or the poet, but in this poem, it's the mirror that is speaking. So how does the mirror's voice sound in relation to the subject matter? Think about it. We can also look at the choice of words in order to detect tone. So depending on the words, if you see words like she shouted, blurted, whispered, crooned, those are some of the words that we can look at that will direct you in the direction of the tone that the writer is using. And also you can look at punctuation marks that are used. Exclamation marks would suggest something different from just the use of full stops. All right, very good. And of course, you can look at devices that the writer uses to convey his or her attitude about the subject matter. So let's go over those. In order to detect tone, look at the voice, the speaking voice in the work, choice of words, use of punctuation, and you can look at the devices that are used. So through the voice of the mirror, what is the tone of the poem? I want you to write 3 words that you could use to describe the tone of the poem. Remember, tone is the speaker's attitude towards the subject matter. All right, so write 3 words that you could use to describe the tone of the poem. Did you come up with detached? That's a very good word right there. You could have also looked at the word frank. The speaker is frank. What is detachment? Before we move on, what is detachment? When we talk about detachment, we are talking about a situation where you're not emotionally connected at all to the topic. All right? You're 2 separate entities, and the reality is what it is. So that's what we mean by detachment. You don't get emotionally drawn into it. And we can see, as in the case of the mirror, it is very detached. It just tells you as it is. The woman comes, she looks at me, I cannot give her what what is not there. It's very detached. It's the same thing with the frankness. The mirror says, I'm silver, I'm, 4 squared, 4 cornered, the eye of a little God. What you give me is what I reflect. I swallow up the images I see and spit them out. It's very frank. It doesn't get emotionally attached to say, oh, I see this woman and my heart goes out to her because she's aging and she's not doing. No, the mirror tells it as it is. So it's a tone of frankness. We also see the objectivity coming out in, the speaker's tone. Very objective. What you see is what you get. Now, of course, we have to present our evidence. I tell students all the time, literature is like a courthouse. You cannot present a case without your evidence. You will lose. And when you lose, you end up with a grade 5 or 6. Sorry, we don't want that. So let's look at the evidence now. So in terms of the detachment in the tone, we can look at the punctuations, in this case, to assess the detached feeling or the detached tone that the speaker is using. So notice throughout the poem there are short sentences and no indication of heightened exclamation or change of pitch. Just simple sentences or statements that reflect frankness and neutrality. Look back at the poem and see just a series of simple sentences, no exclamation marks to say, oh, the mirror is getting all excited and so on, nothing like that. So that speaks to the detachment in the tone. In terms of the frankness, we could look at the choice of words. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. I am not cruel, only truthful. Very, very frank. Nothing that leaves you to wonder, what exactly is the mirror saying? It is straightforward. And just as how the mirror operates in reality, what you see is what you get. What it says is what it means. All right? In terms of being objective, we could look at literary devices. She turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. We looked at that as contrast. And the mirror is contrasting itself with the candles or the moons because unlike the candles or the moons, it is not going to distort the image at all. It is not going to create a version of the image that is put in front of it just to satisfy somebody. No, whatever it is put in front of it is whatever the mirror is going to reflect. So far we have looked at the use of devices in conveying meaning. We have looked at the creation of mood. And what is mood again? What does mood refer to? Right, the feeling you get having read the piece. We have also looked at how tone contributes to the meaning. Very flat, very neutral, very objective. It therefore leads us to understand that whatever the mirror sees, it reflects. And the reality is, this woman is aging and she just needs to deal with it. So, I couldn't leave without giving you a little follow-up activity. And this is where now you put everything into a nutshell. So this is your question. Show how the poet uses 3 devices as well as tone and mood to emphasize the meaning of the poem. Again, show how the poet uses 3 devices as well as tone and mood to emphasize the meaning of the poem. Now, how are you going to approach this question? Let me put some pointers on the board here. The first thing you would need to do is to establish what the meaning of the poem is. So, 1, what is the poem about? Having established that and gone into depth to talk about what the poem is about, what you can do next is to pinpoint 3 devices that the writer uses. But it's not just to identify the devices though, you know, it's to identify them and to see how they relate to the meaning, how they help to clarify the meaning. So it's pinpointing the devices and assessing how they pertain to the meaning of the poem. And then the third part is asking for how tone and mood also relate. So the first thing you have to do is to establish what is the mood, what is the tone. And again, it's not just to say it is a mood of sympathy, it is a mood of sadness. It's not enough. The question says, how do they emphasize the meaning of the poem? So now we have to form that link. So what is the mood? What is the mood? What is the tone? And how do they contribute to meaning? And if you write about those in a nice little package, then you're on your way to writing a well-developed essay. All right, just to recap, in today's lesson, we looked at the significance of the poem's title. All right, we looked at what the mirror is, what it entails, and so on. We also assessed the situation in the poem. Just to refresh our memories, a woman is not pleased with who or what she has become, and she searches the mirror in order to find an image that will never ever appear again. We looked at and identified devices in the poem, and we discussed how they contribute to the meaning of the poem. Some of those devices were the personification, use of contrast, simile. Was there another one? Yes, the metaphor. Very good. And we also discussed the tone and the mood of the poem. We said that tone refers to the writer's attitude, while mood speaks to how you feel having read the piece. If you have any questions on what we have done today, send them in to our various platforms and we'll answer them for you. Until next time, I'm Alethea Brown. Up next, CSEC Mathematics. Stay with us.
Here, interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel on onespotmedia.com. With a combination of live Zoom classes and recorded class time, Schools Not Out lessons, and numerous educational content, we've created a comprehensive 24-hour channel dedicated exclusively to educating our nation's youth. Early childhood through to primary, secondary and tertiary, it's one stop on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in association with Television Jamaica Limited.